pleasure to be here, and well, good afternoon, Mexico. Well, I am going to coordinate this session. It's session 5, and it is about international cooperation, development, and global policy. And I have 3 members, one from UNAM, another one from Colegio de Mexico, and also another person, our Chinese, who is from the Latin American Institute of the CAS, of the Social Science Academy. And we are very happy to be here. It's an honor to be here. As I have been here since the beginning of the coordination of this event, and also because we had been in the others conference. So it is very grateful to see old friends with us. So I am going to give, as I am seeing the program, we are going to begin as it is in it. And first, is going to talk María Cristina Rosas. She is from UNAM. She is from the School of Political Science of our university. Cristina, would you like to begin, please?
Thank you, Alicia. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers, the PUEA, Colmex, and the organizers of this seminar. Thank you for having me here. I'm going to share a presentation with you, and I will be speaking about global health diplomacy, which is a topic that has raised a lot of concern under the current pandemic, and the role of the People's Republic of China and the Republic of Korea. That said, the issues I will be addressing include the relevance of learning from previous experiences. The 2 countries I'm going to be speaking about have previous experiences in dealing with coronaviruses. In the case of China, we remember the SARS in 2002, 2003. And in the case of the Republic of Korea, we remember it was outside the Middle East region that faced the MERS coronavirus back in 2012. MERS arrived into Korea in 2015, and it had a terrible experience in dealing with that. But the moral of the story here is that you need to learn from bad experiences. You need to learn because you can do better the next time you face a challenge. And this is the situation these countries are facing currently in dealing with the SARS-CoV-2 or the COVID-19. Then I will say a few words about global health diplomacy. The topic I am dealing with is not exclusively global health diplomacy, but I would like to share some views with you about what it is, how it works, because there is no consensus about what it is yet. And then I will speak briefly about what's the strategy, what seems to be the strategy of China and South Korea about global health diplomacy and the challenges they're facing. Beginning with the relevance of learning from previous experiences, well, as I mentioned before, the 2 countries have accumulated a very important experience in dealing with epidemics. China faced the SARS, the severe acute respiratory syndrome back in 2002 and 2003, with serious consequences in a number of areas. And in 2015, South Korea faced the challenge of MERS, the MERS coronavirus. Here is a map where you can see and remember what was SARS about. Of course, it hit very bad China and Southeast Asian countries, but also some Western countries. Especially, we remember the case of Toronto in Canada, where a number of cases were confirmed due to traveling to China. And it was a coronavirus that attracted a lot of attention. In the case of MERS, MERS is another coronavirus, more lethal than SARS. I should probably mention that SARS, when somebody gets SARS, the first SARS of 2000 to 2003, 1 out of 10 die. That's what the statistic says. And in the case of MERS, 4 out of 10 die. So MERS happens to be so far, including the COVID-19, the most lethal coronavirus at this time. And this coronavirus developed mostly in the Middle East, and as I mentioned before, hit hard South Korea. You can see here a cover of Newsweek magazine at the time the SARS hit China. Due to this outbreak, Beijing faced diplomatic isolation as it rejected international health assistance. That's a major change when it comes to now in dealing with the coronavirus. That's why I want to bring to your attention the issue of learning from previous experiences, because at that time, China said, okay, I don't need help, and also denied entry of personnel from the World Health Organization, resorted to secrecy around the outbreak, causing the virus to spread rapidly across the country. SARS, being the first global epidemic of the 21st century, caused much panic all over the world, and faced with strong international pressures, and that's a very important issue we should also bring to the attention of our audience. WHO recommended travel restrictions. I remember myself going into China in 2003 because I was writing the book that's behind me, a book on Chinese foreign policy, and I was the only passenger on board. It was really impressive. Believe me when I tell you, it was impressive. At that time, I understood what was strong international pressures and travel restrictions. That was incredible to see and to experience it. But despite all these bad experiences, SARS epidemic prompted new thinking about public health management in the country and in the world. And SARS failures, it was determined, that were caused by an under-resourced and overly centralized health system with little experience in infectious diseases and no information disclosure mechanisms. Local governments were also reluctant, were not very cooperative with the authorities, so that helped for the rapid spread of infection. And since then, the Chinese government established the information system for disease control and prevention, and connected hospitals and clinics all over the country. Please have in mind that China is a huge country, and it has 5 times the size of Mexican territory. So it has around 10 million square kilometers. It's huge. So to have a connection between hospital and clinics across the country, believe me when I tell you, that's a major accomplishment. And yes, Beijing acknowledged the relevance of participating in international health networks. It understood it had to do it. And especially developing close interactions with Western scientists, with the World Health Organization epidemiologists and public health experts from other countries. Many state-led research programs were initiated to study infectious diseases, antiviral drugs, and vaccines. And China also built a much-needed level 4 biosafety laboratory as a result of SARS. So when the COVID-19 arrived, well, China was much better equipped to deal with it. What happened with South Korea? Well, MERS, this Middle East coronavirus, was first identified in Saudi Arabia in 2012. But how is that South Koreans got it? Well, it was due to travel by a Korean businessman, a 60-year-old man who traveled the region, the Middle East region, got the virus. He returned to South Korea, and the authorities reacted very slowly. He visited different hospitals, and eventually he was diagnosed several days later that he got the coronavirus, the MERS. But that happened once he had spread the virus to many people in the country. So outside the Middle East, and you can see this image that shows how MERS spread in South Korea. It was really a failure of epidemiological intelligence and surveillance. And yes, South Korea was outside the Middle East, the worst hit country due to MERS. So when the coronavirus started or arrived in South Korea, and let me tell you something, that day that the coronavirus, the first coronavirus was first confirmed in South Korea was the very same day it was confirmed in the United States. And I mention this because when you go to the Johns Hopkins database, you can see millions of Americans, testing positive for coronavirus. And you can see that in the case of South Korea, they are doing a terrific job. Testing is taking the lead in South Korea. The model of testing as it is done in South Korea has been replicated all over the world. The South Korean government developed epidemiological intelligence and protocols were improved at hospitals and care centers. And well, this is very important to understand why, in my opinion, and not only my opinion, it seems that outside the Arab countries, China and South Korea happen to be the best equipped countries in the world to deal with coronaviruses. It's because of the accumulated experience they have. Now, that said, let me go quickly to the issue of global health diplomacy. Global health diplomacy is somehow a new field that has yet to be clearly defined and developed, though there are various definitions. I'm going to use here the definition of the Geneva group that is working closely with Ilona Kickbush, with the World Health Organization. So global health diplomacy deals mostly with the need for common ground to accommodate international organizations, countries, celebrities, NGOs and pharmaceutical companies' interests so that better approaches to health challenges are developed. It is believed that these actors have conflicting interests, but global health diplomacy is about, establishing common ground so that they can cooperate for the benefit of global health. Mexico, it is fair to say, has championed global health diplomacy initiatives during the pandemic. First, thanks to the United Nations General Assembly resolution that was passed by 179 countries. That is unbelievable because you know that the UN headquarters are in New York, and New York was suffering a lot in April due to the pandemic. But under those circumstances, no matter those circumstances were prevailing at that time, Mexico was able to promote this resolution about international cooperation to ensure global access to medicines, vaccines, and medical equipment to face COVID-19. This is of critical importance because that puts Mexico in the same dimension, in the same tune with China and South Korea, countries that have privileged international cooperation to deal with the pandemic. Also, we have another example of global health diplomacy developed by Mexico. It is the agreement between Mexico and Argentina, endorsed by the billionaire Carlos Slim through his foundation, to guarantee access to Latin American countries of the vaccine developed by AstraZeneca. We all know about this arrangement. These are not the only arrangements that Mexico has had when it comes to global health diplomacy. As you know, the Mexican Foreign Ministry has been working a lot in securing vaccines from other providers, in securing medical supplies and such. So Mexico is not only recipient, but also provider of global health diplomacy initiatives. That said, let's go quickly to see what China and South Korea have done when it comes to global health diplomacy. Well, testing in the two countries has been a key issue. If you take a look at the statistics, it is very impressive to see that China has conducted, at least until October 12, that's 3 days ago, 160 million COVID tests within the country. That is the equivalent to 12% of the country's population. That's amazing. And of course, China has shared this expertise of tests with the world, as we all know. As of October 15, that's today, China has 90,881 confirmed cases of coronavirus and 4,739 deaths. Compared to what we are witnessing in other countries, this is really indicating a control over the disease. Amidst the worsening COVID-19 situation in the world, China has also shut off the dispatch of medical supplies, experts, technical assistance, academic articles to explain what the coronavirus is about, what to do, what they know. And by April this year, the Chinese government has had so far extended medical aid to as many as 82 countries and organizations like the African Union and the World Health Organization. Medical assistance is not only targeted at the governmental level, but is also carried out through its local governments, private companies, and non-governmental organizations. So it complies with the concept of global health diplomacy, right? And Beijing is also leveraging its cloud in public health technology by sharing technical know-how on the diagnostics, therapeutics, either by sending a team of experts or through video conferencing. That's another issue that's in which China has played a role when it comes to international cooperation. And now we are facing what some experts call the diplomacy of face masks. That reminds us of the panda diplomacy. There's a lot of talk about the panda diplomacy. Well, because now we have a pandemic, it is needed a diplomacy of face masks or a face mask diplomacy that has put China as a leader in responding to the pandemic at the time when the US and the European countries, exception made Germany and Russia, have shown their incompetence in handling the pandemic internally, especially the US. Look at Trump, he got the disease. That shows the failure of the strategy of the US. The US withdrawal from, it should say WHO, although it has threatened to withdraw WTO as well, has damaged political concertation at a time when cooperation is much needed, and Beijing seems to benefit from that. Beijing has taken the lead by supporting WHO efforts and by insisting that the made in China forthcoming vaccine could be a sort of world heritage. Here's the president of China during the 75th General Assembly of the United Nations. And he was explaining this, that the vaccine will be delivered to the world almost for free and that cooperation must prevail. Now, of course, there are challenges to the Chinese strategy. Challenges are many. The most important, of course, are the tensions with the United States, because Trump, as you know, has insisted on defining the COVID-19 as the Chinese virus. That's very insulting and that's not non-diplomatic, but you know how Trump is. Apart from that, there is controversy over the place of origin of the outbreak, and also the trade war that Trump has developed, not only against China, but mostly against all the world, including allies, key allies of the US. And also there are tensions between Taiwan and China, because Taiwan, as I'm sure you know, is not a member of the UN, neither a member of the WHO, and has used its expertise in dealing with the pandemic to position itself as a leader in dealing with the pandemic. And let me say, Taiwan has done a terrific job, according to the figures we have here. 530 COVID cases and only seven deaths. I envy that. So that's very impressive. But of course, you know, politics is always surrounding these issues. So let's.
Are you finished?
Yes, I'm gonna finish. I have two things to say about South Korea. First of all, the coronavirus outbreak, it is clearly created a good image, international image of South Korea, the country which reduced its number of confirmed coronavirus cases in early February, now is perceived as a model of what to do. That country has a very impressive capacity of testing every day 20,000 people. And as of October 14, yesterday, it had only 24,988 confirmed cases and 439 deaths. Yes, there are cultural issues here. Voluntarily, Korean citizens decided not to go to crowded places, decided to stay home. That's important, and that makes a difference between South Korea, for example, Western countries such as Sweden that have called a lot about herd immunity. Well, in Mexico, there's a lot of talk about that. Well, in South Korea, people behave and they say, I'm going to stay home because I want to take care of my people. And that's cultural and that's fascinating. Things to think about, well, there is a document, you know about it, called the Soft Power 30 that puts European countries and the US at the top. They are the best ranked countries, whereas Korea, South Korea, and China are ranked 19 and 27. So they're very down in this soft power index. And we also have the Global Health Security Index, where China and Korea rank 51 and 9 respectively out of 195 countries. Of course, these indexes are going to rethink, they need to rethink the role play by China and Korea. And yet the question remains about global governance. We may be having a lot of cooperation in dealing with the virus, but this is not the only challenge we're facing in this occasion. We have to deal with a number of other issues that involve, of course, political will that I believe is the key. Thank you.
Cristina, thank you very much. You have talked about this diplomacy and very interesting things about the lessons that China and Korea are giving to the world, and maybe also that takes in the importance of testing all the people. Well, the next conference is going to be by Elodie Braun. Elodie, please just begin your presentation.
Thank you, Alicia. Can you see my PowerPoint right now? Yes, okay, thank you. Good afternoon here and good morning to our Chinese colleagues. I will speak about the challenge of maintaining cooperation with divided partners and the case of China with Brazil and Venezuela. In this presentation, I argue that after a decade of intense rapprochement, the Chinese government must address increasing challenges in its links with these two countries, and for two reasons. First, because the two Latin American cases are going through domestic divisions that impede a fluent development of bilateral relations. And secondly, because there are also strong tensions between countries in the region that freeze any coordination. The result is that China faces more and more difficulties to promote collective action with Latin America, specifically in the context of the pandemic. At the same time, we observe a rising diversification of Chinese partners in Brazil and Venezuela away from their central government. To defend this argument, I will analyze where we come from and the emergence of challenges in China's relations with both countries, deepened by domestic crises. Then I will turn to the regional and international contexts that represent other obstacles for the development of bilateral ties. So, to begin with, let's go back to the golden age that took place during the first decade of our century. Brazil and Venezuela became the two most important China's partners in Latin America and the Caribbean during the Lula administration in Brazil and Hugo Chávez's government in Venezuela. Of course, political and economic links previously existed, but not with the same intensity. Indeed, the rapprochement we observed during these years deserves a lot of superlatives. China was the most visited country in Asia and one of the most visited countries in the global south by Lula and Chávez. Due to a favorable international context and the boom in Chinese demand for commodities, China converted itself in the first Brazilian partner for exports in 2009 and the second for Venezuela. Last year, it became the first one for Venezuela because of US sanctions on the Venezuelan oil that curbed bilateral flows with the US. Chinese investments are growing also in Brazil and Venezuela, the last one until 2017, and Venezuela joined the Belt and Road Initiative in 2018. In addition, China became a significant lender for the Brazilian energy and infrastructure sectors and the first creditor of the Venezuelan government until 2017. In total, according to the database of the Inter-American Dialogue, China loaned around $62 billion to Venezuela and almost $29 billion to Brazil. Finally, mutual support in international organizations strengthened. For instance, China supports the Maduro government in the UN Security Council and the UN Human Rights Council. With Brazil, dialogue improved thanks to coalitions such as the famous BRICS and also basic on environmental issues. Despite these impressive results, and as usually occurs when countries get closer, difficulties were already looming ahead at that time. In both countries, China played a fundamental role, also not the exclusive one, in the reproduction of economic primarization. That is to say that Chinese imports from Brazil and Venezuela are essentially composed of commodities, oil and minerals for Venezuela, soybeans, meat, and minerals for Brazil, while its exports are more diversified and based on industrial products. This reinforces the Dutch disease in Venezuela, characterized by inflation and deindustrialization. In Brazil, the profile of trade triggered off protectionist demands from the domestic industrial lobby through the action of the National Industry Confederation and the Federation of Industries of the state of Sao Paulo. Moreover, economic activities linked to exports to China are facing growing concerns due to their environmental costs. Again, these issues are not exclusively related to China, but they are part of the agenda of bilateral challenges. In addition, regarding Venezuela, bilateral projects do not escape the implementation difficulties of the Bolivarian Revolution. For example, projects do not develop optimally because of the lack of funds, the lack of skilled staff, and rampant corruption. These problems are officially recognized by the Venezuelan authorities, and Hugo Chávez made a statement on that point back in 2006. So, when the international context worsened and domestic crisis emerged in Brazil and Venezuela, challenges increased for China as it became a domestic topic. In Venezuela, a multidimensional crisis has affected the country since 2014. Things got worse last year when the USA, followed by various countries, recognized Juan Guaido as the legitimate representative of Venezuela, and when the US imposed stronger sanctions on the Maduro administration and the oil sector. The economic collapse strongly jeopardizes Chinese presence in Venezuela. For instance, many companies cannot keep working in the country because of the sanctions. Furthermore, the Venezuelan authorities still have to pay off 20 billion US dollars of debt. And since 2017, the Chinese government has granted new conditions to its Venezuelan counterpart. Also, doubts exist regarding the stance of the opposition's main representatives on China. Recently, China has served to some radicalized political actors as a symbol of differentiation with the Maduro administration. This was not the case before last year. At the same time, Chinese political representatives maintain informal contacts with Guaido's team, according to the Venezuelan politician. In Brazil, the crisis is more political in the wake of the impeachment of Dilma Rousseff in 2016, and then the election of Jair Bolsonaro on a divisive discourse. Here again, China has been used as a topic of polarization in the Brazilian domestic political game. For instance, inside the government, the radical ideological branch represented by Eduardo Bolsonaro, the president's son and political advisor, and Ernesto Araujo, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, tends to criticize China in order to gain influence and close ranks around the president. On the contrary, the military and representatives of the agribusiness sector promote stronger ties with China. So as a consequence of the importance of bilateral relations, China is now on the domestic political agenda in Brazil and Venezuela. This implies an adjustment on the part of the Chinese authorities to preserve their interests and to facilitate fluent links with both partners. This goal is even harder to achieve in the current Latin American international context. The COVID-19 appeared in a very bad moment in the region when tensions were growing on the Venezuelan issue. In my view, three trends complicate the Chinese relations with Brazil and Venezuela. First, the strong divisions among Latin American and Caribbean countries make any coordination almost impossible. This is disturbing for the Chinese political actors that promote collective action with the region. The symbol of it was the creation of the CELAC China Forum established in 2014. CELAC was launched in 2011 and aims at bringing all Latin American and Caribbean countries together. But the organization entered in crisis on the Venezuelan issue in 2017. This year, the Mexican government is trying to rescue the organization. Last March, a CELAC meeting on the COVID-19 was held by Argentina and Mexico, along with various regional organizations and a representative of the Chinese Health Ministry, but Brazil did not participate. Second, the Trump administration is promoting clear-cut positions in detriment to consensus in Latin American affairs and sometimes to China. For example, Donald Trump's government increased pressure on Maduro's team that obliged China to take a stronger position in the UN Security Council, which goes against its strategy of conciliation and complicates its image among the Venezuelan opposition. Moreover, the Trump administration is demanding exclusivity in some technological sectors, which goes against the development of Chinese companies in Latin America. In this regard, current pressures on the Brazilian government to impede the arrival of the Chinese 5G technology are symbolic. Third, tensions between China and the USA have escalated in the context of the COVID-19. According to the Chinese Institutes of Contemporary International Relations, these tensions may tarnish China's image in the world in a context of great uncertainty regarding the new virus. So China has to deal with this challenge in its ties with Brazil and Venezuela because it is reproduced at the domestic level, as already mentioned. At the same time, the COVID-19 may offer new opportunities for cooperation and stronger links between China and Brazil and Venezuela. Indeed, the pandemic imposes cooperation for all countries. At the multilateral level for Latin America, even Brazil in a more skeptical way, it is crucial to promote the universal access to a vaccine. Here, I am referring to the regional support of the UN General Assembly resolution that Cristina just mentioned before me, and the resolution that closed the World Health Organization annual meeting last May. In this regard, China's commitment coincides with Latin American expectations. However, the $1 billion loan that China proposed to the region last July will be difficult to implement collectively. At the bilateral level, both for Brazil and Venezuela, China is the main provider of medical products to fight against the pandemic. Furthermore, cooperation between Brazil and China is being carried out to find a vaccine as soon as possible. Regarding medical products, with Brazil, no less than 39 planes of the LATAM company traveled from China to Sao Paulo to supply local needs. With Venezuela, up to the end of September, 8 flights have been organized for the same purpose. Here in the slide, you can find 2 pictures of that kind of planes. The Brazilian and Venezuelan governments bought parts of the product, but flights also included donations. This leads me to my last point. Donations, mostly by Chinese actors to their Latin American counterparts, show a diversification of actors that contribute to bilateral relations. Many Chinese companies that are working in Brazil and Venezuela made donations, as well as provinces such as Jiangsu with Venezuela. Interestingly, the associations of Chinese communities also contributed with funds, for instance, the Brazil-China Cultural Communication Association. To conclude, Chinese partnerships with the Brazilian and Venezuelan governments have ended their golden age and are now facing new and growing challenges, all deepened by the COVID-19 pandemic. However, the diversification of actors engaged in these links and promoted in the current context may represent a different kind of Chinese presence in Brazil and to a lesser extent in Venezuela. Thank you.
Thank you, Elodie. Very interesting, especially how the diplomacy of China can work with Venezuela and Brazil, that they have 2 different policies and they are fighting between them. But China are friendly, it's very friendly of both countries. And also the interest of the vacuums, which is going to be very important after the pandemic. Who is going to give all those vacuums to the world? The competition that it is now between USA, Europe, the European countries, Russia, China, to have this vaccine, and also at least in the Mexican government, how, as Cristina told us, how we are in both, in 2 fronts. Thank you very much, Elodie. So we will give the microphone to Professor Wang. Please, Professor Wang.
Thank you. So you can see my presentation?
Not yet. You haven't shared us.
Oh, I'm sorry. Now it works?
No, I think you have to put share screen and then there's another button when you put share screen. That's working.
Perfect. Okay. Okay, thank you. Thank you for inviting me to attend this great conference. It's a great honor for me. And thank you for the great presentations by the previous two speakers. Now I will give a brief analysis about Latin America, Chinese relationship with Latin America and the Caribbean against this background of pandemic. First, let's go to my outline. I will show you 6 points. First one is impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic on China and Latin America and the Caribbean separately. Second, I will show you some major challenges to this relationship. The third, there I will show you some joint actions by China and regional Latin American countries in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. The first one is some potential opportunities for this relationship. And the next one is key issues worth of our attention in developing this bilateral relationship. The final one is a very brief conclusion. So the impacts of the pandemic are very comprehensive. So I don't have enough time and ability to really analyze the impacts. So right now I will show you some impact economically on China and Latin America. First, let's go to China. This we can find China is the first country in the world to witness an outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic. China has taken very strong measures to bring the pandemic under control. Based on this progress, China has gradually reopened the economy and gained an economic growth in the second quarter this year. It's good. China is expected to keep positive growth in this year, but the growth rate will be very moderate compared with the economic performance in the past 3 decades. So, it's widely supposed the economic growth rate will hit the lowest point since 1990. So in this May, the Chinese leadership proposed a new economic development pattern. It's called dual circulation as a solution for China to build up resilience against external shocks. And it's also aimed at rebalancing the Chinese economy from an export and investment driven one to a one more focusing on domestic demand. And then let's go to the impacts of the COVID-19 on Latin American and the Caribbean. Yes, I will focus on the economic impacts. As of now, we know this region, Latin America and the Caribbean, is the epicenter of the COVID-19 pandemic. So Brazil, Colombia, Mexico, Argentina, and Peru are in the top 10 countries with the most confirmed cases. Right now, this region is the most affected region by the pandemic. And this region now is suffering a lot from the pandemic economically. According to the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, this pandemic will result in the worst recession in the region in a century. So there will be a 9.1% contraction in the regional GDP this year. And according to IMF, this region's economic performance is among the worst in the world this year. So according to ECLAC, according to ECLAC, the world of the future is going to be very different. And the COVID-19 pandemic demands the region, Latin America and the Caribbean, to build a new developed model. The region has to turn again to regionalization and to regional integration as a response to the reorganization of economic geography. So next, I will go to the challenges of the COVID-19 pandemic confronting the present China-Latin American relationship. I think those challenges can be divided into two categories. The first category includes some short-term challenges. The second category includes a long-term challenge. The first short-term challenge is this unprecedented international travel restrictions. I think those travel restrictions have some symbolic influences on this relationship. It seems that those restrictions on international travel is widening the geographical and psychological gap between China and Latin America. The second challenge is more like a warning signal. There is a decrease of bilateral trade, although this decrease is quite moderate. According to the General Administration of Customs of China, China's trade with Latin America and the Caribbean between January and April 2020 fell to USD 91 billion US dollars, a decrease of about 7%. According to ECLAC, Latin America and the Caribbean trade with China decreased about 2% between January and May. The third challenge is a slowdown of international governmental cooperation due to the pandemic effects. So all those short-term challenges will make us to get a long-term challenge for this bilateral relationship. So we can find in the past 20 years, trade, investment are major factors promoting China's relationship with Latin America. Right now, there is a prospect for China to undergo a very quite low speed economic growth in the next years. So against this background, we have this concern. There might be a decrease of trade between China and Latin America. So we need to find a new driving force to promote, to continue maintain this momentum in this bilateral relationship. Yes, there is always the other side of the coin. We can find something very interesting during this period of outbreak of the pandemic. I have found a lot of reports from the Chinese media, international media about the joint actions between China and Latin America in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. First, there is mutual assistance between China and the region. At the outbreak of the pandemic, many regional countries, Latin America and the Caribbean countries, offered solidarity with China and offered material support to China. According to an official from the Chinese Foreign Affairs Ministry, it said, according to him, the leaders of many Latin American countries and the heads of regional organizations sent letters to express their condolence and support for China. Costa Rica, Trinidad and Tobago, Suriname, and Uruguay mobilized their entire countries to provide China with anti-epidemic materials, including 600,000 masks, nearly 1 million pairs of sterilized gloves, and more than 60,000 sets of surgical clothing and other medical supplies. Yes, China has got a lot of support from Latin America at the very beginning of this outbreak of the pandemic. On the other hand, China has offered a lot of help to the regional countries. The second is there is a very frequent exchange of donations from enterprises in China and the Latin American and the Caribbean countries. For example, we can see those enterprises from Mexico, Uruguay, Chile, Brazil, and Argentina has offered a lot of donations to China. I think, yes, it's maybe in late January and February. That was January and February was the toughest time for China to fight against the pandemic. Those countries, those companies offered their valuable help to China. So on the other hand, yes, later, when the situation in China kept on improving, those Chinese enterprises like Huawei, Costco, a Chinese shipping company, China Three Gorges Corporation, a Chinese construction company, and many other Chinese enterprises also offered donations to Latin American and the Caribbean countries fighting against the pandemic. It's a really mutual assistance. The third one is there is joint research between China and Latin and the Brazilian institutions on the research of COVID-19 vaccines. And there is another interesting thing is there are new air flight routes between China and Latin America. Yes, in April, an airplane from Argentina flied via New Zealand to China. It's a totally new air flight route. And in this May, a cargo plane from Mexico, Mexico. Yes, this company launched a new cargo route between Mexico City and Shenzhen in China. So it's a very new phenomenon. So based on those analyses, I think there are potential opportunities for China to promote the relationship with Latin America. According to ECLAC, the response to a pandemic in Latin America and the Caribbean should be structured in three phases. First one is control. Yes, now we are in this phase of control. We are cooperating. There is a very strong cooperation between China and Latin America. The next phase is a reactivation phase. Right now, we can find China is the first major economy in the world returning to economic growth. So I think China could offer some economic help to Latin America by promoting its importing of Latin American goods. It will be a very positive force to triggering to promoting economic growth in regional countries. We can find China is going to hold third China International Import Expo. It is to be held in this autumn. I think it's also a good opportunity to expand Latin American and the Caribbean regions countries export to China. So at the restriction fees, I think there are also some potential opportunities to promote this bilateral cooperation. According to, so ECLAC has suggested regional countries to build a new development model in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. In China, the leadership has proposed a new strategy of dual circulation. So I think there might be some potential for closer bilateral cooperation between China and regional countries in the process of remaking their development pattern. China could contribute to regions' pursuit of a new pattern, a new development pattern, by sharing with regional countries its technology, market, financial resources. Next, I think there are three issues worth of our attention in developing this bilateral relationship against the background of a pandemic. The first one is, I think, from a Chinese perspective, solidarity and joint efforts are prerequisite to win the fight against the pandemic. China is firmly against any stigmatization, referring to the virus as the China virus. I think China is also firmly against those politicization of China's medical assistance and the related efforts. The second is we must notice there is very strong interdependency between China and Latin America. There, personally, I think there is no one-sided dependence of China, Latin America and the Caribbean on China. There is also very strong China's dependence on this region. China is importing a lot of food from this region, and it's especially noticeable that China needs Latin America and the Caribbean as a kind of backup support if there was any major crisis caused by public health or natural disaster in China, because we are far from each other geographically. So if there was any major crisis like this COVID-19 pandemic, Latin America and the Caribbean could offer China a lot of help. It has been proved. The third one is, I think, from Chinese perspective, China is promoting its relationship with regional countries, but it's not for any geopolitical power struggle. Right now, this relationship is more bilateral. It's not against any third party. Finally, I will go to my short conclusion. It's for your reference. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Professor Wang. Very interesting, your paper. I read it because you sent us a draft paper, and it is very interesting, all the data that you use to show us how was the development of the COVID-19. But I think we have a lot of questions between us, and one of the questions that I would like to put on the floor is, how is China seeing these relations between Latin America and China? And this, you talk about that dual circulation, because in the beginning, Latin American countries gave some help to China, and then you gave some help. But this help diplomacy, what is in the back of that help diplomacy? Because many people say that this help diplomacy is not free. They have another interest. And this is one of the things that I would like to put on the floor. And the second one is that, of course, Latin America is, Cristina, ¿cómo se dice el patio trasero, the backyard? Latin America always has been the backyard of the USA. And in all this confrontation, and they are also losing some power around in the global world, and also in the confrontation between USA and China. How is China seeing Latin America? And maybe during this year, it's a good way of China to improve their bilateral relations, as Elodie has expressed in her paper, how China has very close relations between Brazil and Venezuela, even if they are very opposite. And also, well, there are a lot of questions, but I think it will be better if maybe Cristina can have, if she has some questions, or Elodie, or you between us. I don't know who would like to put the first questions, or to put on the first comment. So who will raise the hand? Okay, Professor Wang, come in.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for your question. Thank you for your comment. I think I've got the first question, so I should answer your question first as a first person. Yeah. I think China has donated a lot of medical equipment, including face masks, to many countries. But I don't think it's a well-designed diplomacy. I mean, this pandemic is very rapid. It's very out of our expectation. China is not prepared for this big outbreak. So at the very beginning, China needs to get a lot of help from other countries. Yes, countries like Latin American countries, many Latin American countries and the Caribbean countries have offered their support to China. So I think it's a duty for China to return its to repay those support, those help. I think it's the first reason for China to donate those equipments to other countries. The second reason is China has this ability. We have a very strong manufactured industry to produce all those equipments. So I think the Chinese leadership has proposed this shared future. So we should fulfill this idea to help other countries to overcome the negative effects from the pandemic. So I think that's the very start of this so-called face mask diplomacy. I think it's very natural. It's not out of a political design. Thank you.
Okay, Professor Wang, very interesting your answer. And well, I don't know who will like Cristina. Okay, please.
Okay, well, why is China doing this? Well, of course it has to deal with these controversies surrounding the origin of the virus. And also it wants to profit from the fact that the US is not leading the fight against the virus. Now, speaking about Latin America, I see a geopolitical concern here. because China wants to stop Taiwan from having diplomatic relations with many Caribbean and some Latin American countries. That's a fact. And Taiwan is using the health diplomacy for its own benefit. So that's a fact. And I also believe that health diplomacy coming from China, coming from Cuba, Cuba sends, you know, doctors all over the world. It has a very well-established health diplomacy. And Russia is now sending airplanes to Italy, to the US. It's very impressive. It's donating the vaccine. Now it has 2 vaccines. Well, why is that these countries do that? Well, mostly because they are sanctioned countries. In the case of China, it is facing sanctions on arms sales from the West. And probably China is betting on the fact that, well, now I will help the world. And probably one day, Europe, sooner than later, Europe and the US may stop sanctioning me. And I may get my arms from them. Speaking about the geopolitical environment involved in this pandemic, I would say that China is facing competition, not only coming from Taiwan, but also from South Korea. I'm sure you saw the speech of President Moon at the 75th General Assembly of the United Nations, and he proposed something like, let me quote it properly, something like launch of a Northeast Asia Cooperation Initiative for Infectious Disease Control and Public Health, which would bring together his country and North Korea, and also China and Japan and Mongolia. Although this may create tensions because everyone is trying to use, again, the pandemic for its own benefit. So that said, I believe we shouldn't lose the perspective of the political benefits of global health diplomacy.
Thank you, Cristina. Elodie, please.
Thank you, Alicia. I would like to speak about the perception of China in Latin America that you also mentioned early. And there are quite differences among countries. Now, I will base my reflection upon the Latino Barometro survey. That is an NGO that makes a survey in Latin America from Chile. And in Venezuela, China has a very positive image among people that have been interviewed. And I think that's because it was not a complicated relation during the last decade. And we will see, that's why I mentioned what has been happening since last year that may represent a slight change among the opposition. But generally speaking, the vision of China is positive. That's not the same thing in Brazil, and that's quite structural across the last decade. And I think it is to be linked to the importance of the industrial sector in Brazil, and that has lost jobs, and many people are accusing China. I think it's more complicated than just one factor, but this impacts the image of China in Brazil. It will be interesting to see the effects of the COVID-19 cooperation in Brazil, if it has some consequences for the image of China. And I would like to just make a question to Wang Peng. I totally agree with you that it is necessary to find a new driving force to maintain relations between China and Latin American countries. And do you think that the increased participation of other actors like companies, provinces, cities, communities may be a solution to renew the driving force of the relations between China and Latin American countries? Thank you.
Professor Wang, please.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your question. Yeah, I think we have a long, the relationship between China and Latin America is very long. It's a long process, but it moves very slowly. But in the past 20 years, past 30 years, it has changed a lot. Now it's advancing very quickly. due to the trade and investment. But frankly speaking, some people from regional countries are not really satisfied with this relationship. I mean, now we are importing a lot from regional countries. We are exporting a lot of things to regional countries. So there is some, there might be some conflicts of interest. I mean, many local people are complaining about China's economic competition in the region. So I think trade and investment are good, but they are not very sustainable. We need to, China, from a Chinese perspective, China needs to develop more comprehensive linkages with regional countries. At the very beginning, there is only state-to-state relationship between China and the regional countries. Right now, it's moving deeper into a relationship between enterprises. For example, this time, many enterprises in regional countries donated a lot of things to China, and then those Chinese enterprises repaid their kindness. So I think there is going to be a very strong relationship between those enterprises. Enterprises are very important actors in shaping this relationship, especially those Chinese enterprises. There are many Chinese enterprises in regional countries. They are quite powerful. They are quite influential. They are doing business, a lot of very big business with regional enterprises. So in my opinion, they are very important in shaping this relationship. Right now, we can find, yes, there are new actors like cities, city government, some provincial government, some think tanks. Yes, personally, I think, yes, we should take advantage of this opportunity to diversify this relationship, to move it from a state-to-state relationship to a relationship between society, between those enterprises, something like that. Thank you.
Okay, Professor Wang, and one of the lessons that gives China is you decrease during the first trimester in less than 6.8, and then you increase the GDP in 3.3 or more or less. And this is this development and this is very fast that you just, even it hasn't finished the pandemic, but you have the discipline that everybody answers to be unlocked, and that gives you the opportunity to be safely and also to decrease the disease of many people. And I think this is very interesting, and this is a very good lesson, because in Latin America, the pandemic is, even we suppose that we are in color, I think, orange in Mexico, but I think we were in yellow and then returned to orange, but we don't have the discipline, and also the government hasn't never put the face mask since the beginning. But I think it's also cultural, because you use a lot, because also by the pollution that you have, but you have reduced the pollution in like in Beijing or in other principal cities, you have reduced the pollution and you are very accustomed to the face mask, but we aren't. So this is like, we just didn't, the question is, what will happen if, since the first moment that the pandemic was announced, we must use a face mask and make a lot of measures to avoid that. So it is very interesting what's going in China and the lesson that it is given to Latin America. I don't know if Cristina or Elodie would like to say another thing or just a comment, just to to finish our session. Yes, Cristina, please.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Alicia. This is fascinating. I believe what you mentioned is something I've been claiming for a long time. I mentioned some months ago that this pandemic was about the national character of countries. And now that you speak about China, now that we have seen what South Korea has done, it is clear that countries that have experienced traumatic events have better responses to the pandemic. Look at Israel, look at Germany, look at countries that really had a hard time in dealing with several issues. So I'm not saying that we need a catastrophe in Latin America to develop a national character, but of course we shouldn't forget that our economies are weaker. Mexico was already facing a crisis prior to the pandemic. And we need people to work outside. So you say stay home. Most people cannot because they need to go out to work. So that's a reality, and that marks a difference with other countries that are doing much better than us.
Microphone. Yes. Yes, in the informal market, we have a very big, it's like around 60% of the people are in the informal market in Latin America, and they have to work daily if they want to have an income, and they need to have some food. So it is impossible to put all those people in their homes because even the employment decreased a lot. So we have a real problem on development of the employment. And even before January 2020, all economy, the global economy, but especially in Mexico, we have a very dramatic decrease in the GDP. So the thing that the pandemic, that COVID shows all the bad policies that we have had during the, since the Washington Consensus, but especially right now, because the investment in health and education have decreased a lot. So it is incredible. And right now I am, they invite me to talk about the 16 Sustainable Development Goal, and the 16 is justice and peace. And I was trying to find that the correlation between the budget in military defense and education and health. And it is incredible how the military budget has increased a lot during the last years, because we have a parallel economy that nobody wants to talk about that, but we have the parallel, I said parallel to be nice, but it is all the say narco-traffic, the narco-traffic market that we have. So in this case, Mexico has a big problems, but structural problems, and we have to change the budget. And also another thing that we have paid a lot of external debt service payment, that it's incredible if you cross the budget of education, health, service, the service of the debt that are external acreedores, external banks and hedge funds, and it's health, defense, education, and external debt. It is incredible how we are using our budget and how the austerity policies in Mexico has damaged our life. We are closing because we have to go to the closing ceremony, but I will give you 1 minute if you want to say something. Elodie, do you want to say something? Only 1 minute, and then Juan, and then Cristina. Elodie, please.
Thank you, Alicia. Well, just I would like to thank all of you for sharing this session today, and I hope I will have the opportunity to read more about your works. That's not always easy to. The diffusion between our countries is not always very easy, as we know. So it will be great to know more, and I hope it will be the first step towards further cooperation. And I really appreciate our dialogue this night or this morning for Wang. Thank you.
Thank you, Lily. Wang, do you want to say something?
Thank you for everything. It's a great honor to be here. I think right now this webinar is a great way to contribute the movement of this bilateral relationship. Not only do we need trade and investment, we also need those discussions about the bilateral relationship. More discussions, the relationship will be better. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Wen Peng, and said, I love all your friends, all of the Institute of CAS and ILAS, where I had been several times. Just said hello to them. Cristina.
Yes, thank you. It's been very, very nice to be at this panel. And I am going to say something I always say with regards to the pandemic. I believe we may be missing the point, because if we only look at the pandemic, and today everything is about the COVID-19, but prior to that, everything was about terrorism. And because we were looking at terrorism, we missed a point about health issues and environmental issues and food issues and everything. And now we're missing the point again. We're looking only at that pandemic. So we shouldn't miss the point. We should, of course, attend or see the pandemic, see the tree, but also the forest. And the forest has a number of challenges we are not discussing, but we should be dealing with them.
Well, thank you very much. It has been great to be here. And I hope, Professor Wang, you will come very soon to Mexico, to UNAM, and we hope to be also in the CAS. And very grateful to have this session. Thank you very much. We are closing because we have to go to the closing ceremony. Bye-bye.